Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Old Man Flappy Nuts asked me to repost my video on synthetic religions or forming a synthetic religion so that you could use it in a commune because communes work better if they are religious, right? I looked for that video. I tried to find it. I used the search function and, a bunch of scripts came up that had the word religion in it, but none of them were the right one. Maybe I made that video without a script, and I can't search the videos unless it's in the title. And I looked for the video by title, but I couldn't find it. And so either I just couldn't find it, or I might have deleted it, because I did delete a bunch of videos to make more room on my hard drive so that I could, keep making new videos. So yeah, I don't know if I even have it anymore. But I did look. I did look for it. I was going to repost that video that he asked me to repost for him, but couldn't find it. So whether it's still there or not, I don't know. But I guess I can't repost it because I don't even remember what it was called, because I have a terrible memory. So I just figured that I would remake that video. Like, I don't really remember what I said in it. I remember a little bit, but I'd kind of been wanting to make a video on that topic again anyway. I think I might have even said in that first video that I was planning on doing another more comprehensive video on that subject because I was just sort of summarizing from memory what I'd said in a voice recorder note when I made that first video on that topic. I think the voice recorder note was a lot more detailed. But that voice recorder note is one among many, 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 many voice recorder notes that I have. Many. And so it'd take fucking forever to find that one if I wanted to listen to it and make that into a video. So, eventually I'll presumably, hopefully, go through all those old videos, and all those audio notes and turn them all into videos. But, I won't get to those anytime soon. I have so many of them. And so just from like my thoughts on this topic, which I think a few of these might be new thoughts that I did not include in that original video, I just sort of am like sort of maybe putting forward some of the things that were in that original video that I can remember or whatever, and some new stuff that I probably should have put in that video, but maybe it was too long or I just didn't think about it until after that video was released or whatever. So yeah, this is sort of the new video on this sort of same topic in response to Old Man Flappy Nuts' request, and the script goes like this. The topic of synthetic religion is related to the issue of freedom. Freedom comes from wealth, and wealth is a form of power, and power comes from cohesiveness, and cohesiveness comes from virtue. So you first have to have virtue so that you can have cohesiveness, so that you can have, wealth, which is a form of power, and freedom comes from power and wealth. Wealth is power, and it's, wealth is not the only form of power, but it's a very important form of power. So if you want freedom, you have to have power, and you have to have wealth, right? So virtue is the source of all of that. So virtue is the source of freedom. People will be unable to band together with each other if they are, in other words, they won't be able to be cohesive if they're not able to get along because of everybody fighting, because of them not being moral enough, responsible enough, polite enough, patient enough, cleanly enough, etc. If people lack virtue, then they will not be able to band together, and that means less wealth, and that means less power and less freedom. Cohesion is only possible if people are moral, and the human animal seems built to believe in religion. The brain seems to be hardwired for religion. I think it might be possible to build a synthetic religion that everyone knows is fake. They don't actually believe it, but it serves the purpose of a philosophy, kind of, and helps them get in touch with their archetypes and channel them in a good way. And it helps them balance their mind and emotions and body and willpower. So it still performs most of the benefits of religion, but without the people who follow it without them actually believing it. They know it's fake. It's an artificial religion, and they know it's artificial and fake, but they still follow it and practice it because it benefits them. It helps, kind of like Scientology, but Scientology actually has these ridiculous beliefs that the people in it are supposed to actually believe. But the synthetic religion I'm talking about is kind of like Scientology or something like that, but without the actual ridiculous beliefs that people actually believe. Such a synthetic religion could help them develop themselves through meditation It could help them have a unifying belief system and help them get in touch with the archetypes that all people have within themselves, and then help them channel those archetypes in a healthy way instead of in a destructive way. Like in another video note that I just made yesterday, it's going to be a different video. I'm not going to discuss it in this video, but in that video, I talk that voice recorder note that I'm going to turn to a video eventually. In that video, I talk about how like you can channel sexuality and intensity in sexuality in a positive way, but that's only possible with guys who are dominant and the girl being a virgin and being very submissive and stuff, right? And obedient. That would be like the healthy way of channeling that archetype. But otherwise, if she's not a virgin, then she's going to want to channel that archetype in a destructive, evil, dark way by, like cheating on her husband with like a so-called alpha, like a strong, aggressive, asshole who she's not going to have a relationship with. She's just going to cheat on her husband with this guy because he's quote unquote more masculine than her husband. But that doesn't even necessarily mean he's actually more masculine. It just means that he's an asshole, and she being a psychopath because of promiscuity respects that, right? But women don't have to be like that, right? Like they can channel that sort of like desire for a masculine man in a good way. That archetype can be fulfilled in a positive way, or it can be fulfilled in an evil way, right? So like having a synthetic religion can help people get in touch with those archetypes and channel them in a healthy way instead of in a destructive way. And it can help them corral their dark side, the evil, destructive, selfish archetypes, or the evil, selfish, destructive manifestation of certain archetypes, right? The main problem I see with such a thing, like a synthetic religion, is that it would be something that would only be done by atheists or agnostics, but such people would probably all have their own ideas on what to practice, what to believe, etc. Perhaps everyone would be wanting to create their own synthetic religion. And you don't want to force anybody to follow a particular synthetic religion, but at the same time, if everyone in the commune creates their own religion, then they're likely to just do so in a way that does not challenge their weak points, their weak character points, you know what I mean? And is instead just a form, and then this self-made religion just ends up being a form of self-gratification, self-satisfaction, self-indulgence, etc., that doesn't even really make them better, right? But if you have somebody else create it, then it's like, why should I follow your religion? Who makes you the boss of me, right? And if the religion's going to be very freedom-oriented, then it's like, how do you force this on them, right? And plus, if they don't actually believe it, then it's like, what's going to compel them to actually be really faithful in practicing their religion, this synthetic religion, right? Like, because they don't feel an obligation to God to do it because God doesn't exist, So then there's that problem as well. On the one hand, you want to allow everybody freedom, but on the other hand, you want everybody to have a certain amount of morality in common in the commune, right? Everybody should have, virtue in common with each other, right? They should all be virtuous people. That is something that should bind the commune together, You want everybody to be of above average moral character, more like the moral character the people in the 1950s or earlier had, I think the tarot is a tool that such a commune could possibly use. Western occultism perhaps provides a workable or almost workable model for belief and meditation and practice, an almost workable model for a synthetic religion, although perhaps only that would only perhaps be part of the model, Western occultism has also combined the tarot with the Kabbalah, which I have nothing against, and if that were used in a commune, then people would decide for themselves if they want to focus more on the Kabbalistic tree of life or more on the tarot, or on both equally, right? Also, there are 3 or 4 paths up the tree of life, from Malkuth to Keter, or Ein Sof, depending on how you want to classify the end of the journey. You can go up the path of severity on the left, which goes through Gebura, or you can go up the middle path, which goes from Malkuth to Yesod to Tiferet to Keter, or you can go up the path of mercy, which goes through Chesed. Or I'm not sure, but you might be able to go up through the Sephiroth, through the zigzag path that traverses all the Sephiroth, although there is no zigzag like a lightning bolt. Although there's no path usually shown between Chesed and Binah, nor is there a path between Hokmah and Gebura. And that might possibly be because supposedly, as God was manifesting the world, he did so in stages, which are the Sephiroth. And one of the Sephiroth, which was the Sephiroth of Da'at, the non-Sephiroth, the broken Sephiroth, the void, that Sephiroth, which Da'at means knowledge, that Sephiroth was not strong enough to hold the light of God, and so it broke. So it went from like, Keter to Hokmah to Binah, and then down to Da'at, and then Da'at broke, and then it went down to Chesed, then over to Geburah, then down to Tiferet, then down to, Netzach, and then over to Hod, and then down to Yesod, and then down to Malkuth. So I'm not sure if you're supposedly able to zigzag up the Sephiroth like that, like supposedly God used to manifest the world, but you definitely supposedly can go up the tree of life by one of those three routes. The left-hand path, the path on the left, the path on the right, that is the pillar of severity, the pillar of mercy, or the middle pillar. In case you, know a little bit about the tree of life in Kabbalah. And if you don't, then now you do, I guess. And if you don't know what any of those terms that I was using mean, those are the names of each of the Sephiroth, and you can, look up the tree of life and look at each of the Sephiroth and then re-listen to this part in case you want to follow what I'm saying here, But enough about that. I think the tarot is quite useful because it's not only useful as a tool of meditation. You can take, one card each day and meditate on it for that day, just that one card, to try to get in touch with the feeling and idea and archetype of that tarot card. But you can also use the tarot as a tool of divination. And even if you don't believe in the supernatural, which would preferably be the case for everyone in the commune, because preferably they'd all be materialists, so that there's no working against each other because of own group preference of praise on others. Like if you let Jews into the commune, then the Jews would be more preferential toward the Jews in the commune and might even prey on the other people in the commune, financially or sexually or however, in order to, because they think that, because of their religion allowing them to prey on non-Jews, you know what I mean? And I think Muslims are allowed to do that to a degree as well. Like taqiyya, I think that's what it's called, something like that, allowing Muslims to lie to non-Muslims. And I think they're allowed to be sexually predatory toward non-Muslims as well, such as on children and stuff, right? So I think it'd probably be best to keep all religion out of the commune, unless perhaps maybe it would be okay if you had some people from Eastern religions or maybe some Christians. Like maybe the commune would be okay if it were a mix of like Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Baha'i, and agnostics and materialists and stuff like that. That might be okay, although maybe then there'd still be some own group preference, although not predatory own group preference. But like I was saying, there could be some, preferably they'd all be materialists and stuff. And even if you don't believe in the supernatural, like I was saying, you can use the tarot to do divination that helps you understand that your mind is a pattern recognition machine. That was the ultimate conclusion that I came to tentatively when I used the tarot for divination, and it seemed to work, at least some of the time. I kind of had to come to the conclusion that I think it's because the brain is a pattern recognition machine. Everyone's brain is. So it makes it, and a lot of the cards have multiple meanings or whatever, so this makes it so that your mind can, even without you artificially, consciously trying to do it, your mind can use the cards to be like, oh yeah, it did make sense, it did predict the future or whatever, right? But really that just goes to show that your mind is a pattern recognition machine. So I think you can use tarot as a divination tool to help you understand that your mind is a pattern recognition machine. It's not really telling the future. This can be a useful thing, So the tarot can be a Jungian tool, like, Carl Jung, that form of psychology. In other words, tarot can be a tool for working with the archetypes, and the tarot can be a tool for understanding what Robert Anton Wilson talked about in his amazing book Prometheus Rising, which is absolutely must read. You have to read Prometheus Rising. It's sort of like a self-help book, I think, sort of from the 80s, that's very like practice oriented and very much about like learning how your mind works, and try marijuana to understand how the Fifth Circuit works. It works on the book's about like it models everything on like the 8 circuits, which is an idea created by Timothy Leary, the LSD guru. And he talks about how like marijuana like can help you access the Fifth Circuit, and like LSD can help you access, I think, like the 6th or 7th Circuit. It's really interesting. He talks about how like the first circuit is like aggression, like submission or dominance, and the second circuit is what is it, positivity or negativity? Like the first one is like forward back, like positive or negative, left or right. The other one is like turns it into like a quadrant, and now there's like, because it's, not just forward and back, it's like up and down now, and then you can like a positive aggression person, like a cowardly aggressive person, like a positive submissive person or a negative submissive person, and then you got the third circuit, which is intellect, and then you got the fourth circuit, which is sociosexual, I think it's called, like, like friendship and mating and kids and that, having kids and that kind of thing. Like, the book is really, really good, Prometheus Rising. You have to read it. It's not even that long. It's not overly intellectual. It's the kind of book that any idiot could read and understand. But it's really good. You really have to read that book. You could probably even find it at a used bookstore for cheaper because it's been around so long, and it was pretty popular. But yeah, in that in one part of that book, Robert Anton Wilson suggests, like, you could spend try like a month being like a devotee of Thor, like pray to Thor, like, like learn everything you can about Thor and like really believe in Thor for like a whole month, and then you'll start seeing like coincidences and things that like seem like evidence that, yeah, he does exist, like, and then you switch, and then the next month be a devotee of another god or a goddess and do the exact same thing, praying to that god, studying that god, reading that god's scriptures, etc. And then you'll start seeing that god everywhere and start seeing all kinds of coincidences that seem to indicate that god's real, right? And he's not trying to convince you that like any gods exist, because he's a materialist, he's trying to convince you that like if you do this, you'll start to understand that your brain is a pattern recognition machine, right? That sees whatever it's focused on. Like how when you buy a car, you start noticing that car everywhere, especially the ones that are the same color as your car, You buy a Toyota Camry that's white, you start seeing white Toyota Camrys everywhere. And, you never noticed them. They were always there. You just didn't notice them before because you didn't have a Toyota Camry, right? See, the brain is a pattern recognition machine, right? And then you're not going to be fooled by supernatural stuff as easily. You're going to be less likely to believe in the supernatural if you realize that your brain is a pattern recognition machine by practice, such as doing tarot divination or, devoting yourself to a god and then another god for the next month, etc. Right? So, tarot is useful in that sense, and it's useful in dealing with archetypes, and it's even more useful because of how it's divided. It can work as an intellectual, emotional, psychological, physical tool, like integrating a person. It's really cool because of how it's divided. It's divided into the trump cards, the largely archetypal trump cards, the major arcana cards, and the minor arcana cards. And the minor arcana cards are divided into the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. These 4 elements are represented in the tarot by coins, discs, pentacles, or whatever you want to call them. The Rider-Waite tarot deck calls them pentacles, and Crowley's Thoth deck calls them discs. Both decks are really good, by the way. I'd recommend getting both tarot decks. They're probably the top 2 tarot decks, and they're both quite good. I have both of them. Regardless, this is what represents the element of earth, whether you call it discs or pentacles or whatever. Cups represents the element of water. Wands represents the element of fire, and swords represents the element of air. Discs correspond to the body, cups correspond to the emotions, wands correspond to willpower, and swords correspond to the intellect. And each of these categories has 10 cards, from the ace of that element to the 10 of that element. Then there's also like, the page, the knight, the queen, and the king in the Rider-Waite deck of each element. But I'm not really going to talk about that too much. Sort of irrelevant, sort of not. Whatever. The point is, you can understand each element better because there's several cards of each element, right? There's like 14 cards of each element, although I think the 1 through 10s, especially the 2 through 10s, are much more important than any of the other 5 of each element, and the other 5 cards that exist in each element. Don't much like the ace cards, and I don't much like the king, queen, knight, or page cards. But I do like the 2 through 10 cards of each element. And in Crowley's Thoth deck, the 2 through 10 cards of each element are all named, which is quite useful. Like the 2 of discs is named change. In the Rider-Waite deck, they're not named at all. In the Thoth deck, they are named. The 2 of discs means change. The 9 of discs is gain. Crowley labeled the 7 of cups debauch. He labeled the 3 of cups abundance. He named the 3 of wands virtue. He named the 4 of wands completion. He named the 6 of swords science. He named the 9 of swords cruelty. And those are just a few examples, but you get the idea. Right? You can use the tarot to understand the 4 elements better and to understand your body. I'm not saying the 4 elements are real in some kind of metaphysical sense. I'm just saying, like, they are representations of your body, emotions, willpower, and intellect. And so, to understand yourself better, you can go to understanding the 4 elements better through understanding the 2 through 10 cards of each element. Understanding those 36 cards can help you understand yourself better. Each of those 4 aspects of yourself: your body, emotions, willpower, and intellect. It can help you understand yourself in a more clear and comprehensive way. You could also use the tarot to plan a path through the tree of life if you want to go up the tree of life to try to seek enlightenment, because the tarot cards have been assigned by Western occultists to particular paths connecting the Sephiroth of the tree of life. There are 10 Sephiroth and 22 paths between those 10 Sephiroth, which have been associated by Western occultists with the 22 cards of the major arcana of the tarot. That is death, the hanged man, the eon, the chariot, the lovers, the hierophant, the high priestess, the fool, the magus, etc. The major arcana cards are especially archetypal and are thus especially useful for meditation, and thus, quite fit for helping you travel up the tree of life. But I think the commune could also use various deities. Everyone could pick their own deity. And then that deity is that person's personal deity that they basically view as similar to being like a power animal, such as a person who really likes tigers and feels a special affinity toward tigers and has himself a very tiger-like soul. One person might want to take Thor as his personal deity, but unlike what I was saying earlier, not just for like a month or temporarily, I'm saying like each person in the commune could choose like their permanent deity that they identify with, right? Another person might choose, Mahakala, the Tibetan wrathful deity. Another might choose the Greek goddess Diana. Another might choose the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. Another person might choose the witch goddess Hecate. Another person might choose the Norse god of wisdom Odin. Another person might choose the voodoo deity Papa Legba. Another person might choose the Hindu goddess Kali the Destroyer. Another person might choose the Hindu elephant-headed god Ganesh. You get the idea. A person would try to develop the virtues and wisdom and power of that particular deity. A devotee of Odin would focus on developing wisdom. A devotee of Thor might focus on developing strength of all kinds: mental, emotional, physical strength, physical strength, emotional strength, mental strength, etc. A devotee of Ganesha, or it's either Ganesha or Ganesh, I can't remember which, but Ganesh or Ganesh a devotee of that elephant-headed god might focus on accruing wealth of various kinds, because that's a god of wealth. He could focus on accruing monetary wealth, intellectual wealth, spiritual wealth, emotional wealth, etc. A devotee of Kali might focus primarily on killing the ego, might practice Chod meditation, such as in Tibetan Buddhism. Some people practice Chod, or however you pronounce it. It's got those 2 little dots over the O, Chod. And it's about where you visualize chopping off your body parts. You close your eyes and you imagine chopping off one of your hands, and then you think, my hand is not myself. And then you imagine chopping off your leg, and you're like, yep, my leg's not myself. Even if I lost my leg, it'd still be me. And then you just go on, chopping off body parts mentally of yourself, and then you keep thinking, yeah, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. So you can attain a realization of not self, of, the fact that the ego isn't real. A devotee of Avalokiteshvara might primarily focus on development of bodhicitta in a serene, happy kind of way, and a devotee of Mahakala might focus primarily on development of bodhicitta in a courageous, determined, aggressive kind of way, etc. You get the idea. I think the issue of, and regarding sexuality, I think the issue of sexuality would be one that the commune would need to largely stay out of. I think creating a religion with particular sexual practices would be problematic, though, because sexuality, as I've said before, is like nuclear energy. You have to be very careful and very responsible with it, or else you can fuck up yourself, you can fuck up other people, and you can fuck up society as a whole, or in this case, you could fuck up the whole commune. Which is, and that's what we've done. We fucked up all of society by fucking up sexuality, by promoting promiscuity, by, incentivizing and subsidizing single motherhood, by, making divorce easy, etc., etc. We fucked up the whole country by fucking with sexuality, fucking with monogamy, by not being extremely careful about sexuality, you can damage yourself and other people in ways that are extremely difficult to repair. Unless it were a commune of MGTOW monks, banning sexuality would also be a bad idea, though, because, sexuality is, too powerful. You can't totally restrain it. All you can do is hope to channel it in a non-destructive way, in a non-destructive direction, corral it to healthy expression. But at the same time, you can't tell people how to have sex or anything like that. You can't ban it, but you can't just say, do whatever you want sexually, that's fine, too. You can't do that, because that would be destructive, But at the same time, you can't let them do whatever you want, do whatever they want when it comes to sex either. You can't let them be promiscuous, you can't let them do wife swapping or anything else destructive, or else it'll cause massive problems for the commune. I think just providing a few bare bones rules for the commune regarding sexuality might be best. Rules such as there is to be no sexuality which takes more than your fair share of women. This automatically rules out polygamy, polygyny, that is men having more than one woman. Polygamy is a basic term which includes polygyny and polyandry. Polyandry is one woman having more than one man. Polygyny is one man having more than one woman. So specifically polygyny is what I'm referring to. This would, not taking more than your fair share of women would rule out promiscuity, it would rule out polygyny, it would rule out polyamory, it would rule out serial monogamy, and it would rule out threesomes of single girls or with a wife and another single girl. But not taking more than your share of women does not demand monogamy. It does allow sex with prostitutes, like if you only have sex with prostitutes, and it also allows, you could have a wife who allows you to have sex with prostitutes on the side, and so that's not taking more than your fair share of women either. So that would be allowed, as well as it would be allowed if men wanted to share women, like one woman per every 3 men, and those guys could be promiscuous in that way without taking more than their fair share of women. As long as men are not sleeping with each other's women, are not lying, are not hogging more than their fair share of women, and are thus not turning other men into incels, and are not providing a bad example to other men, then there's nothing wrong with them engaging in any of these 4 kinds of sexual behavior, which do not disenfranchise other men and do not cause problems in the commune. Although one of the things that you would have to ban, which does not take more than your fair share of women, and does not technically involve cheating, is wife swapping, because that's just really destructive shit, and you're just really like begging to have your wife fall in love with the other guy or one of the other guys, and then that's just utter chaos. That's bad stuff. Don't get involved with that shit. That's bad news. That's basically suicide, getting involved in that shit. So you'd have to ban wife swapping and that kind of thing too. But like I was saying, it wouldn't. The commune would not have to restrict men to just monogamy. But I think the commune would have to be pretty clear that if people want to make sex part of their religious practice, then that's on them, right? Like that's their own individual thing, right? Sexuality will not be universally incorporated into religious practice in the commune, because if you do that, then you're basically making the commune tantric, and then that will end in disaster. I think the commune would also be wise to recommend that its members not incorporate sexuality into their religious practice, but not forbid it either. Like, if they want to mix sex in their personal religious practice, they want to mix sex with their personal religious practice, then they can. It's up to them. The commune merely recommends that they don't, because combining the potent forces of religion and sex is almost always catastrophically destructive. It's very dangerous. There's a reason, Tantrism never became a big religion. Like, even in Tibetan Buddhism, Tantrism is, like, kind of mostly theoretical. Right, like even the Dalai Lama himself, I believe, and other leading like Tibetan Buddhists of each of the 4 schools don't practice physical sex with other women, physical tantrism. They just practice tantrism in the sense of visualizing the male and female deities having sex so as to arouse energy so that they can have better meditation. They don't actually, these Buddhists, they don't actually have sex with women. Although it is part of tantrism that if you're really, really, really advanced, you can have sex with a consort, physical sex, but even the most advanced, Tibetan Buddhists don't do that today, and like, I think there's very few, tantric Hindus also, like, tantrism just results in destruction. It's not typically a viable thing, and if it is, it's only viable for very, 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 very few individuals, just the most advanced people, like super, moral people, super, meditationally advanced, etc. So basically, tantrism is something it's basically something that almost no one can engage in without it being destructive. You see, so it's very dangerous to combine religion and sex, especially for average people. It's nothing but destruction. Because you're combining 2 powerful, out of control substances together. Right? The result is rarely peaceful or productive. It might seem to start out great, but in the end it usually ends in disaster. Actually, not just usually, almost always. It's kind of like BDSM or wife swapping, right? It's something that does not usually go along with long-lasting, happy, stable romantic relationships, right? And if you have a commune that doesn't have, stable relationships, if you've got all this chaos, that's going to harm the commune, probably would destroy it. You know, maybe some people do BDSM and have a long-lasting marriage, just like maybe some people do sex magic or wife swapping or otherwise incorporate sexuality into their religious practice. Not that wife swapping is, sexuality incorporated into religion, but like some people do these things that are typically destructive, and it doesn't destroy their marriage or whatever. But just because there's exceptions, just because there's couples who sex magic or whatever works out for, that doesn't mean that it's a good idea for most people. It doesn't mean it's a good idea to allow in the commune. Like just like how some people can smoke cigarettes for 60 or 70 years and die at 95 and never get cancer or emphysema, it doesn't mean that smoking is not horrible for your health. It just means that there are a few people who have such good genes that they can get away with it. You know what I mean? So this needs to be understood, I think. Sexuality is an out-of-control thing. It's a power that's barely under our control, under human control. And even then, it's only under control if we put forth effort to keep it under control. And religion is similar. Religion is also an out-of-control thing. When you pray a lot or meditate a lot, you can have experiences where you touch something that seems to be thoroughly out of your control. You might call it the beginning of ego death or whatever, but the fact remains that enlightenment experience is real, and the conversion experience is also quite real. I'm not saying all Christians or Muslims or whoever have a conversion experience that's powerful, but a lot of people do. These things are things which are out of our control. Even if you know that there's nothing truly outside of yourself, these are not actually, an experience of God or the Alaya consciousness that pervades the universe or whatever. These are, if the Alaya consciousness is the base level, it's kind of like the Akasha consciousness or the cosmic consciousness or whatever. The Alaya is a term used in, I think, one of the schools of Tibetan Buddhism. I think the Padmasambhava school. I can't remember for sure, but typically, like, just because you have this experience that seems to be outside of yourself and is not under your control at all, that doesn't mean that it's actually supernatural or anything, right? Like, and this, but that doesn't mean that, like, you can have any kind of power over it. Even though it's not real, that doesn't allow you to have any kind of purchase, any kind of grasp on that out-of-control experience. Your ego naturally recoils from such experiences. These experiences can be frightening or challenging or whatever. And if you submit to such an experience, which usually demands that you do, that such an experience usually either demands that you submit to it and lose your ego or lose your, rationality or whatever, or, you struggle with it and then it goes away, and because it demands that you either submit to it or it's going to go away. So, these kind of experiences demand submission of the ego and the intellect, and that can be a difficult thing to do, and it can clash with the intellect of a materialist, because he wants to make mental or emotional progress, and he wants to have experiences, but he doesn't want to surrender his common sense or his scientific worldview, just because he's having this, spiritual experience by meditating or whatever. So combining two out-of-control things, religion and sex, is just way too volatile to do in any kind of widespread way in the commune. It should be discouraged, although ultimately it should be left up to individuals. Because you can't be like the sex police in the commune either, and make sure nobody's doing sex magic or whatever, like with sigils, right? Like, if you want to do that, you can, but I think it should be discouraged, right? Like, I think basic rules in the commune are necessary, though. Maybe not about that necessarily, but, like, about other things, right? Like, you can't just leave it up to everybody's conscience how they're going to act, right? But at the same time, you can't have too many rules or else things get oppressive and there's no room for different personalities and stuff, right? I think the 10 non-virtues for novice Buddhist monks to avoid is 10 non-virtues that, like, you should be avoiding, that are given, that list is for novice Buddhist monks to avoid. I think it's a really great list when coupled with the no intoxicants rule of the 5 precepts, but I think that perhaps the 10 non-virtues are too large of a list, too restrictive, although I think that list of 10 or 11 things to avoid is basically perfect. It's 11 if you add that one list, that one from the 5 virtues. From the 5 precepts list of no intoxicants, you add that to the 10 non-virtues list, and you get, 11 precepts. I think that list is pretty much perfect, but in a commune, perhaps only the basic precepts, the 5 precepts of Buddhism would be best to run the commune on, because you don't want it to be too restrictive, right? The 5 precepts are, number 1, don't kill, number 2, don't steal, number 3, don't commit sexual immorality, number 4, don't lie, and number 5, don't use intoxicants. Don't kill in Buddhism means to not kill anything, not even little insects. But in the commune, it could be altered. This precept could be changed to mean obviously don't kill anyone, because then you're going to go to prison. But it could also be altered to mean, like, don't be violent toward anyone in the commune. Maybe the commune would allow people, though, to box or otherwise take out their aggression on each other in a physical but non-destructive way as a pressure release valve to prevent physical fistfights or brawls from occurring when there's conflicts, right? Although I think that probably runs the risk of, like, people who are physically stronger then can kind of get away with acting worse because nobody wants to challenge them to a boxing match, because even though the person's in the moral right and the stronger person is in the moral wrong, he's going to win the boxing match, right? But I guess maybe if everyone were doing it anyway and he were being forced to do these boxing match duels, he'd eventually be getting his ass kicked if he's an asshole, because everyone would be challenging him all the time. And then, yeah, he might win the first boxing match, but after the second or third or fourth, he's going to start losing because he's too tired, you know what I mean? So maybe that would still be a pretty good way to prevent people from being assholes, and maybe the stronger people would not get away with it, because if everyone are always challenging them to boxing matches and they had to accept, then they'd start to lose, So that would be a good way, perhaps, to prevent there from being physical brawls or fistfights. If you just restrict it to boxing, you have a boxing ring, and the two people put on boxing gloves and everything, Like I said, not killing is obvious because of the horrible legal consequences that would result from anybody actually murdering anybody else in the commune. But I think violence has to be neither completely banned nor completely tolerated in all forms. I think it should be channeled, like I said, into boxing or something else that is basically harmless. Don't steal. That precept is obvious and should apply to not just stealing from other commune members, but should also apply to not stealing from outsiders as well. It's not sufficient to prevent commune members from not stealing from people in the commune. You should also prevent them from stealing from outsiders as well, because the habit of stealing will not just be restricted to outsiders. If you allow people in the commune to steal from outsiders, they'll start stealing from people in the commune too. And non-virtues tend to go together as well. So someone who is, for example, callous is more likely to be promiscuous. And someone who's promiscuous, who starts practicing promiscuity, is going to start to become more callous. And someone who is more heedless in general is going to be more likely to abuse intoxicants like alcohol, marijuana, LSD, etc. And someone who uses mind-altering substances like those is going to be more heedless in other ways as other times as well. You see, so someone who steals is going to be a liar as well. And liars are more likely to steal. And they're more likely to do other bad things. Liars are more likely to be unrestrained and use intoxicants too much, etc. All the non-virtues are connected with each other. People don't just have one non-virtue. People who have one non-virtue typically have other non-virtues. People who are assholes also tend to be promiscuous, and also tend to be not terribly honest, and also tend to be dishonorable, and also tend to use drugs, etc. Even if they're not addicted. Like non-virtues all go together. So you want to prevent people from lying, because you want to prevent them from stealing, and you want to prevent them from stealing to prevent them from lying and using intoxicants, etc. If you can prevent them, you can't tolerate any of those major non-virtues, because that'll just mean that they'll start doing the other non-virtues too, you see. So you have to prevent people in the commune from stealing, not just from commune members, but from outsiders as well. That is, people in the country around, or in the cities or whatever around the commune. Right? And this is to preserve both their moral character in general, and also to prevent the commune from being harmed when evil comes home to roost, if you allow it to exist in a form that seems harmless to you. Such as, for example, like how the Miko Piled's father, who's a major general in Israel during a major war, it might have been the 1967 war, I can't remember for sure, he warned Israel. He said, no, we should not be preying on the Palestinians. This will come back to harm us. This will bear, bad fruit in the end, right? But they didn't listen to him. So they've been preying on the Palestinians, and it turned the Israelis into monsters, just like he warned them it would. Miko Piled's father warned them it would turn Israelis into monsters, and it would be bad in general, right? And they didn't listen, and Israelis have turned into monsters. Just the way they demonize the Palestinians is, like, literally they act like they basically straight up say that the Palestinians are not even human. They call them, like, vipers, and they say, Palestinian people who, women who have children are, like, giving birth to vipers and stuff like this, right? Like, they literally view them as inhuman. The Israelis view Palestinians as inhuman. The Israelis have become total monsters. Now, you could say, oh, it's genetic because the Jews are monsters, but I think the Israelis are way worse probably even than your average Jewish person who's outside of Israel. You know what I mean? Like, Israel's treatment of the Palestinians has turned the Israelis into monsters. And preying on the world by way of the petrodollar has turned Americans into monsters. You know, we're way, 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 way worse than we used to be in the 50s. I mean, we were way infinitely better, unimaginably better back in the 50s, and even better in the 1800s. I mean, now Americans, even just the last 20 to 30 years, it's obvious how much worse Americans have become. I mean, not just a little worse, but way worse. Even just over the last 20 to 30 years, I've seen it with my own eyes in my own lifetime. You know, Americans have become callous, weak, degenerate, vicious, etc., etc. So, you know, all stealing must be forbidden in the commune. Lying must be forbidden for obvious reasons. It's antithetical to trust. Lying is antithetical to a sense of community. Lying is antithetical to being able to work together. And lying is antithetical to hard work, generosity, kindness, etc. Lying is conducive to laziness, selfishness, and other bad qualities. Lying only corrupts, and it produces nothing good, and thus it must be banned. But of course, banning lying is not the same thing as demanding absolute 100% openness. Keeping secrets is not the same thing as lying, so I'm not saying people in the commune should be forbidden from having any secrets, you know, or having any privacy. I'm just saying that they should be forbidden from out and out lying to each other. You know, dishonesty should be forbidden, not privacy, right? They should be forbidden from lying to each other, or to anyone, actually. They should be forbidden from lying to people outside the commune as well. Although, again, absolute frankness is not required, and thus the commune members do not have to answer any questions about the commune if they are asked by outsiders, such as coworkers, and they don't have to tell each other all their secrets or anything, you know. Although I think the commune should emphasize the fact that secrets are typically bad, and that if there's something that you don't want anyone knowing, it's probably because you know that they would judge you for it, because it's actually a bad thing, and therefore you should not be doing it in the first place. You know, so the commune should probably, tell that to people on a regular basis so they understand that principle, so that they don't have any secrets, and they have to double check their morality if they do have secrets, you know. Commune members should be told that if there's something that you're doing that you don't want others to know, then it's probably something immoral. It's probably something you shouldn't be doing in the first place. People should be allowed to have secrets, but they should at the same time realize that secrets are usually bad, and a good person typically has nothing to hide, but that's not an excuse to invade people's privacy. There should be no invasion of privacy. Sexual immorality should probably be considered to be mainly avoiding the four kinds of sexual behavior which take more than their fair share. No, 5 kinds. Yeah, I think there's 5 kinds. Yeah. As well as any other sexual behavior with anyone under the age of 16, as well as any sexual behavior with anyone else's woman in the commune, like, you know, sleeping with another man's wife. Although I think avoiding the 5 kinds of sexual behavior which take more than your fair share of women automatically excludes sleeping with women who are already taken, because it excludes promiscuity and polyamory and such. Perhaps any non-consensual sexual behavior would be banned in the commune as well, although you then only want to allow women into the commune who already understand that they have no right to turn their husband down for sex. You know, if your wife or the live-in concubine who you share with other men rarely turns you down for sex, then if she occasionally wants to ask you permission to, you know, not have sex with her when you want to, then, like, you're going to concede to her wish, because if she only says, "Can we please not do it tonight, honey?" If she only says that one out of every 20 or 1 out of 30 or 1 out of every 40 times, then it's not a problem. You're going to be like, "Okay, that's fine, honey," right? But, you know, if a woman's turning you down all the time, then yeah, that's a problem. You know, so you should only, like, keep women out of the commune if they're the type to turn men down for sex frequently. But if, you know, the average woman, if the average woman in the commune only, you know, asks her man if he will not have sex with her on a particular night when he wants to, she only asks that every once in a long while, then it's not a problem. You know, so I don't think you necessarily, if you have the right women in the commune, you don't need to allow marital rape in the commune if you have the right kind of women in the commune, like I said. And as far as the 5th precept, that of, you know, avoiding intoxicants, I think the commune should amend it to mean no abuse of intoxicants, instead of no use of intoxicants at all. You know, in Buddhism it means no use of intoxicants, but, you know, in the commune I think it would be more realistic to have it mean no abuse of intoxicants. That is, no overuse, right? No use of intoxicants at all would be better, but perhaps allowances have to be made. You don't want to be too strict, right? Or else there's no freedom. Especially considering the fact that the more freedom there is, the better, right? So you can't be too strict, and allowances have to be made. The commune could encourage people to not use intoxicants at all, but would only outright ban abuse of intoxicants, not use of intoxicants. So if someone wanted to relax by smoking just a little bit of cannabis after work, then that would not be banned. Although even everyday use perhaps is too much. Maybe you should only be doing it once or twice a week instead. And if someone wanted to have a glass or two of wine after work or on the weekend, then that would be fine too. But, no getting shit-faced, no getting hammered out of your gourd, no getting high as a kite, no, snorting a bunch of cocaine and getting really high, and no getting addicted to any intoxicants either. Although, and regarding synthetic religion, another sort of aspect of it is that regarding it, it would not be necessary to have everyone have a personal deity, perhaps, right? Like, perhaps the commune just suggests it or recommends it, but doesn't force it or anything like that. Perhaps the only mandatory spiritual practice in the commune could be daily meditation. Maybe everybody would be required to do nothing more in terms of religion than, meditate for 10 minutes a day in the same hall, right? Like everybody goes to the meditation hall or the dining hall or whatever, and maybe before lunch every day, before everybody eats, everybody sits at the table for 10 or 20 or 30 minutes meditating before they eat, right? And that would make sure that everybody, meditates enough, right? Without forcing them to have any particular deity or anything like that. Right? The point is that, and I'm not saying like one particular deity that everybody follows the same deity. I'm saying you don't even have to require anybody to have any deity at all. Even their own particular deity that they choose, they don't even have to do that. Right? Perhaps it would be best because having the commune be as simple as possible is best, and least restrictive as possible is best. But you got to impose enough discipline to where people are going to be moral. Right? So the way to do that is to make sure everybody meditates together every day for a certain amount of time. 10 minutes at the very least, I think. But, more than 30 minutes, they could do it on their own if they're really into meditation like that. Like preferably everybody would be doing more than 30 minutes a day. But I think 30 minutes is the minimum that like people should be doing probably, but like maybe it's unrealistic to force everybody to do 30 minutes of meditation a day. So maybe like 10 or 15 minutes would be the minimum that you would force them to do, right? But you'd recommend that they meditate at least 20 or 30 minutes a day. And really 20 to 30 minutes is enough each day to get significant benefit out of meditating. If you do 20 to 30 minutes of meditation every single day or almost every single day. The point that I'm making is that one of the points is that meditation goes across all religions and philosophies. It's just sitting down and closing your eyes. You can focus on the breath. You can do chod meditation. You can do meditation on a mantra or on the visualization of a deity, whatever deity you want. You can pray to whatever deity you want. You can pray instead of meditate. Or the point is that you sit down in quiet for a certain amount of time, and you practice whatever your spiritual practice is. If everyone were required to do that, then it would force everyone to attain and maintain a certain level of mental and emotional development, because just like how moral or immoral you are in your daily life affects the quality of your meditation, affects how well you can calm and focus your mind in meditation, similarly, how much you meditate affects the quality of your daily life and your behavior and your morals. So if you meditate every day, then that will make your mind clearer, your emotions more under control, your heart softer, etc., and you will thus get along with other people better. And in a commune, that's absolutely essential, that you be able to get along with other people. In a commune, one of the most important things is that people get along and work together to accomplish the same goals, such as the commune buying more land, building more housing structures, upgrading other infrastructure, etc. It's almost, I said almost, I think I typed that wrong. It's important that they help each other, that they teach each other skills, that they teach each other's kids. I think I meant to say also. It's also important that they help each other, teach each other skills, that they teach each other's kids things, that they help each other out when they're sick. Like if a guy's wife is sick and, he has to go to work, but yet she's too sick to, she has the flu or something, can't take care of her kids. Well, then, one of the other wives of the commune can take care of her kids until she gets better. Stuff like that, right? It's important that people help each other out, right? Perhaps just having a basic set of cleanliness rules, as well as emphasizing the importance of politeness, of having manners, which is the secular equivalent of a list of moral precepts, as well as having a list of moral rules to follow, like basic moral rules, like I was talking about earlier, like an amended version of the 5 precepts, as well as having a daily meditation time that everyone is required to participate in. Perhaps those things alone. Cleanliness rules, like, for the bathroom and the kitchen, making sure everything's clean, strict cleanliness rules, and emphasizing the importance of manners, and, you know, having a list of moral rules to follow, like the 5 precepts, and having daily meditation, just those few things would be probably enough to make it so that the commune could run smoothly. But of course, theory is one thing, practice is another. You got to amend things so that whatever you're doing works. You know, try different things or whatever, try what you think will work, but if it doesn't work, it's like communism, you know? You don't keep trying it the same way over and over thinking it's going to work when it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? You do what works. What works and what is sustainable. So if it's not working, you do something different. You know, sustainability is an aspect of functionality, though. You got to realize this, although it's often overlooked. You know, such as governments overlooking the non-functionality of fiat currency because the government not realizing that fiat currency is not sustainable. It can take a long time to destroy a country, decades or even longer. And so they don't realize that it's not sustainable. Fiat currency is not. And so they don't realize it's not functional because it's not sustainable. And so they don't realize that it should be avoided because of being non-functional. And simplicity is a big aspect of functionality. Perhaps it would just be best to have a monogamous commune. You know, that would be far easier and simpler than having a more complicated commune, such as a commune that follows the 4 kinds of sexual behavior that don't take more than their fair share of women, and which are not immoral. And are not immoral in other ways either. Like men sleeping with only prostitutes, or men being married but having a wife who doesn't mind him also sleeping with prostitutes, or men being monogamous, or men, what was the 4th one? God damn it, there's a 4th one as well. Like, you know, those 5 kinds of sexual behavior that I mentioned earlier, promiscuity, polygyny, polyamory, serial monogamy, and being married or not married, but, you know, having sex with, like, single girls. Like, if you have a girlfriend, you're sleeping with other single girls as well, who she lets you, or sleep with, or you're married and you're having threesomes with other single girls, not with prostitutes. Like, that uses up more than your fair share of women, thus it's immoral. But, you know, you could be either celibate or monogamous, or you could have sex with just prostitutes, or you could be married or have a girlfriend and sleep with prostitutes. Like, and then there's one other kind of sexual behavior, I can't remember, that's also not taking more than your fair share, and that therefore is also sustainable and moral. So you can do those like 4 kinds of sexual behavior, the 3 that I mentioned and the 4th, which I can't remember, but which I do mention in an upcoming video. So you can do that. And, you know, I should really just look that transcript up and see if I can find it here. Because I should mention in this video, I mentioned all the rest of it, right? All the other ones. So I may as well mention that point as well. Here's the video. I mean the script. Let's see here. Yada, 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 yada. 5 kinds of men. Right. 5 kinds of men who disenfranchise other men, like I said, are promiscuous men, polygynous men, polyamorous men, serially monogamous men, and men who are married or have a girlfriend or wife, or have a girlfriend, but who also have sex with normal single women, not prostitutes. And the 5 kinds of men who are not disenfranchising other men are men who are celibate, men who are monogamous, men who are, that's what it is, MGTOW men who live in a MGTOW commune and have a living concubine that they share with other men. Right. So the four kinds of sexual behavior that you can engage in that don't turn other men into incels and that are therefore not immoral are, you know, being monogamous or being a guy who shares a woman with 2 other guys. And you can be promiscuous if you do that. You could change her out for a new woman every month if you want to, you know, because you're not using up more than your fair share. Because over the lifespan of those women, you're still, you know, not using up, because you're sharing her with 2 other guys, you're not using up more than your fair share of women, right? Because the female span of beauty is, you know, only about more than a third as long as a man's span of libido, and thus, you know, even when you take account for the fact that, you know, you're dipping into the next generation's women, you're sharing her with other men, so therefore you're not, you know, using up more than your fair share of women. So, you know, the 4 kinds of sexual behavior that don't disenfranchise other men are monogamy, doing the live-in concubine thing where you share a woman with 2 other guys, you know, 3 men per 1 woman, and men having sex with just prostitutes, and possibly also very rarely with normal girls, like maybe once every 6 months or once every 3 months he has sex with a normal girl once. And the men who are married or have a girlfriend but have sex with prostitutes on the side, not with normal girls, only with prostitutes, and obviously with his wife or girlfriend's permission, right? Like, those are the four kinds of sexual behavior that don't disenfranchise other men, that don't cause incels, and that are therefore moral forms of sexual behavior, right? And some of those, like I said, can be promiscuous. But as long as you're not harming other men, then there's nothing wrong with that, right? So, like I said, those are the four kinds of sexual behavior, and but you would obviously, like I said, need to get your wife or girlfriend's permission, preferably wife. I don't think you'd want people with just girlfriends in the commune, because then they could be just being serially monogamous, and therefore they're being promiscuous, and therefore they're turning other men into incels, and therefore they're being bad. They don't care about other men. But married men, they could be having sex with prostitutes while on the side, as long as their wife is okay with it, while they live in the commune, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? As long as it's not causing friction in his marriage. Because if it does cause friction in his marriage, right, that's no good. That causes friction in the commune, right? But perhaps even having a commune like that would be non-functional. So perhaps it really is better if, because maybe there's a guy who has a wife who, he never told her that he might want to have sex with prostitutes, with other women, And so then he's in the commune with this wife who expects him to only ever sleep with her. And then, there's this other guy in the commune whose wife is okay with him sleeping with prostitutes. So then, the guy who's only able to have sex with his wife because his wife doesn't want him sleeping with prostitutes, he gets really jealous. He gets really, envious of the other guy who gets to sleep with prostitutes also, right? So then that could cause friction in the commune, and that's no good. So, like I was saying, it would actually be much simpler and probably much more functional if the commune were just monogamous. Another reason although I'm not opposed to men having sex with prostitutes on the side, because like I said, it doesn't hurt any other men, so why not? If it doesn't hurt your wife, if she's fine with it, and it doesn't turn any other men into incels, then, why not? And another reason to avoid the combination of sex and religion, such as tantrism or Western sex magic, is because sex is a base, animalistic, aggressive thing. So it's not really naturally very connected with love and virtue and patience and self-sacrifice the way that, for example, parenting is. I would say parenting is inherently spiritual, inherently virtuous, because you have to upgrade your moral character to be a good parent, right? But I don't think that sex is the same way. You could say maybe marriage is, because you got to upgrade your moral character to make the relationship last, but sex itself is not that way, I would say. I would not say sex is inherently virtuous or forces you to be more virtuous. Yes, sex can be very loving and numinous, but what happens when you get bored of your wife? Does that undermine your spiritual practice if you've combined sex and spirituality? And doesn't it also make your spiritual practice inherently hedonistic and therefore quite flawed and selfish if you practice something like sex magic, right? Doesn't that make your spiritual practice very hedonistic and flawed and selfish? Because if you combine sex and spiritual practice, then you're combining spiritual practice with pleasure, and thus perhaps that makes you less able to endure hardships or practice spirituality without feeling pleasure. Plus, sex is connected to domination, and thus it's an egotistical thing. And ego is antithetical to spiritual attainment. Spiritual attainment is about diminishing ego and ultimately eliminating ego. Spiritual practice is not about aggrandizing, indulging, or strengthening ego. And I think this issue of sex and spiritual practice and their combination is a very important thing to consider when talking about a synthetic religion, because I think people are more inclined to combine those two things, to put those two things together, sex and spirituality, if they're not following another religion, an official outside religion that was, created thousands of years ago or something, right? That doesn't combine these two things, right? This is because people like sex and want pleasure and are driven by their biological urges, and conceiving, gestating, birthing, and loving and raising her children is the closest thing that an average woman comes to true spirituality. I think if people are allowed to create their own religion, then they're more likely to combine sex and spirituality, and this is a bad idea. Just look at today's neo-pagans. There's a lot of combining of spirituality with sex among those people. And I can't remember if I said it in the other video on synthetic religions, but regardless, I'll say it here. What I wanted to say is that I think a lot of the modern creatures developed over the last 100 years or so are actually very strong archetypal symbols that reflect our modern world. People have been turned into cogs in a cruel machine. They're really like The Walking Dead, and hence people's obsession with zombie movies and zombie TV shows. They feel an affinity with zombies because they've been turned into zombies themselves. They no longer work for themselves. They no longer have their own businesses. Like, he's a cobbler and he's a potter, and, they all work for themselves like we used to hundreds of years ago. Now everybody works for a faceless corporation that has no humanity, no compassion, no wisdom, no reasonableness, and pays shit wages. People work crappy, they work long hours to get crappy wages, So they feel an affinity with zombies, people do. People also long for eternal life and for the great power and wealth and sophistication that would come with eternal life, and so they identify with vampires, or so they long after, they really like the idea of vampires because, they would like to be, wealthy and sophisticated and live forever and stuff, right? Imagine if you were an ugly person with a 70 IQ, like you're a real moron, you're a real idiot. You have a terrible memory, no charisma, and you're a guy as well, so you don't even have the advantage of having, a pussy, right, to give you value. If such a low-value guy were to somehow become immortal, he could amass great skill at tons of things because it would not matter that it would maybe take him 100 times longer to learn something than it takes a normal person. He has the time. And he has the time. He has infinite time to learn skills, right? And it would not matter that he could only save a few dollars per year. He'd have an endless amount of time to save. Even if only could save $5 a year, after enough time, that would add up. And then he could use that great wealth to invest in gold, and then the wealth just grows itself automatically, and he gets richer and richer. After 10,000 years, such a moron could be a master artist with millions, maybe billions of dollars in the bank, even though he's an idiot. I think the average person of today realizes that long life is great power, and so they also realize that, and another thing is that they also realize that sophistication is becoming more and more important, and that the skill level that you have to even make decent money is getting higher and higher. Not just IQ requirement rising, skill level rising as well, right? Like you could be doing a job that doesn't require a high IQ, like an author, and you still have to have a greater and greater skill level as each decade goes by to be able to sell well. The bar is rising in everything, not just IQ. If you're going to be a professional author, you have to be a much better author than you had to be several decades ago. If you're going to be an artist, you have to be a better artist than you had to be a few hundred years ago. Maybe even a better artist than you had to be 50 years ago. I'm not sure, but my main point stands, which is that the bar is getting higher. And so people long to be sophisticated. They desire to be sophisticated and to have the time to become sophisticated, which you would need a lot of time for if you were an average person, because they don't have the good memory or the high IQ or the charisma to be able to become sophisticated quickly. And people today also long to be wealthy, not just because they're greedy for sensual pleasures, but also because they realize, even if only subconsciously, that society is becoming more and more locked down, and the only way to have freedom is to have a lot of money. And all people long for freedom, and so they want to be wealthy so that they will have freedom. And the cost of having kids and doing other things is getting more and more expensive as well, and so people want to be wealthy so that they can also have as many kids as they want to have. So people like vampire stories now as well, because they want to live forever and they want to be wealthy and sophisticated. So I think pop culture is almost like the new religion, in that it is presenting all these archetypal images that people identify with, and that is sort of taking the place of religion, right? Like fantasy TV shows are sort of, in a sense, taking the place of religion, like witches and werewolves. These are also archetypal symbols that we see in a lot of TV shows these days. Movies too, from Buffy to Angel to the Vampire Diaries to the originals to Legacies to Charmed to the new Charmed to A Gathering of Witches, or whatever that show with Teresa Palmer and Matthew Good is called. Terrible show, by the way. To the movie Beautiful Creatures, to the Underworld movies, to the Mortal Instruments movie, to the TV show Shadowhunters, etc., etc. This kind of stuff is becoming more and more prevalent because people are becoming less and less religious, and yet they still have those same archetypes within them that want expression and fulfillment, and which still drive people. People still have a religious mindset to their brain, so they like these fantasy shows even if they're not religious, right? So fantasy shows and mythical creatures are becoming the new religion, in a sense. And the new way people think in an archetypal kind of way. So I think people can probably find ways to channel these kinds of archetypes. I think someone should create a new type of tarot card system that's not tarot at all. It's just a similar kind of thing. I know there's already one of those out there. I read the reviews on Amazon, and people didn't like it much, but maybe they just did a shitty job on it. Doesn't mean it's a bad idea. You know, like you could have such a card system, and like you could have a vampire card and a phoenix card and a dragon card and a zombie card and a witch card and a werewolf card and a siren card and a mermaid card and a fairy card and a goblin card and a troll card and a god of the underworld card and a king of the gods card and a goddess of love card and a Buddha card and a Jesus card and a card of war, a god of war card, etc. And each card could have its printed meaning printed on the back or in a booklet that comes with the deck of cards, like a booklet which explains the meaning of each card, not just like what a phoenix is, but like, because everybody already knows that, but like explaining what the spiritual and archetypal and divinational meaning of a phoenix is, right? People did this with tarot not that long ago. I can't remember how long ago tarot was invented, but it's not very old. Playing cards in tarot evolved from the same source, a form of playing cards which I think were also used for divination. And then they kind of diverged into two different forms, playing cards and tarot. But there's still a connection between playing cards and tarot. Diamonds of playing cards are the equivalent of, they evolved, they're the equal, the same thing as the pentacles, discs, suit in tarot. And hearts are associated with water, with cups. Clubs are fire or wands. Spades are wind or swords. That's why spades kind of look like a little dagger with a handle, and that's why clubs kind of look like a big like a big knobby branch or something, like a big knobby club, like a club instead of like a wand, and like, hearts are, emotional, and that's what the element of water and cups symbolize, emotion, right? And diamonds are something that come from the earth, just like, like a gold disc, right? Like you see in the Rider-Waite deck, right? People created tarot basically out of thin air and turned it into a pretty sophisticated divination and archetypal system over time. I see no reason why people couldn't do it again and create a new archetypal card deck based on archetypal creatures and gods from mythology and stuff. That was about all had to say in this video. I did a lot of kind of going off topic and whatnot, so this video is way longer than I expected it to be, over twice as long as I expected it to be, but hopefully Old Man Flappiness likes it, and hopefully a few other people got something out of this as well. This has been Redshift. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it, hit the thumbs down button if you didn't. Peace tracks.